Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, it's good to be here in community with you all. Hearing the name Tondo, receiving that snapshot of my life. Every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh, I need to work on that just a little bit more, like tweak it so that it flows nicely when someone else is reading it, and you did a wonderful job. But that's for me to offer more of that clarity, because I'm like, I don't really understand really what that mission, what my mission is, based on that paragraph, that snapshot. And that's important to me because this is my lifelong work and call to action. And as it is said, the name Tondo means love, and it's something that I've primarily struggled with for most of my life. Wanting to be loved, being born in a family that was incapable or unskillful of meeting me and giving me that love, and finding my way to love, and not being unskillful in terms of how I give that love to others. So that is definitely a lifelong process for me, and it hasn't been an easy one. But many joys have come as a result of walking that pathway. And I didn't come here to talk to you all about love. I came to offer just my testimony and what I could offer as wisdom around generosity. Today's talk was supposed to be the alchemy of generosity, practicing with that, the alchemy. And I know in many of our communities, we kind of stay away from the occultish language, and that alchemy, sometimes there's thoughts and feelings of secret society and communities that are underground. But a way that I like to approach alchemy is deep transformation, and generosity is another practice in which I have transformed tremendously and still have a ton of work to do. So I just wanted to share a little bit about what I have learned, share a little bit of the Buddhist kind of 3 tenets on generosity, share that with you all, what I know in my own experience. And then also a call to action to all who show up in this circle, right? We need more generosity in our society today. We're in this massive struggle. There was a time where the Bay Area was a bubble, a bubble of safety for like-minded people like us, and now even home for many of us feel unsafe, literally, walking to your car. You may not know if your window will be intact. Come on, I'm not the only one. One may be harassed walking the streets. And so what we know, and I work in alternative justice. I work with DAs, I work with courts. This is what I do as a daytime job or a call to action. What I do know about community is that when we're feeling under-resourced, our backs are against the wall, we generally feel unsafe, our bubble feels unsafe. The first thing we're more likely to do is pull back a little bit on the generosity side of things. And another unsurprising thing to me, but I don't know if it's surprising to you, is that we pull back from the generosity that we give to ourselves, because the focus is on survival. How am I going to get through this storm, this unease, these conflicts, the feeling of desperation. And so hopefully today I'm hoping to, instill the hope that I have, that I've been generating for myself, but it comes through the willingness to transform. And so I'll just pause a second and give you all an opportunity to locate, just to do a little self-assessment on just this thought of generosity and the generosity that you're giving to yourself. And so I'll just go a little bit into what generosity is not in terms of our Buddhist practice, our spiritual practice, our path to awakening. So I'm not talking about charity, right? We all have things that we give voluntarily. We contribute. We may be contributing financially to things, volunteer time. This is kind of like the American life cycle. You earn, you give a little bit, you volunteer, and voila, I'm a good person, right? Like this is the title you get, good contributing citizen. This is not what I'm talking about. This doesn't even come close. What I'm talking about, generosity in a sense, is the practice. And so I'll start by saying, I don't know if you all had this experience of, running into a community member here, a brother, or just another meditator, and you run into each other at the supermarket, and one of the first things we ask each other is like, how's your practice? How's the practice going? And it's like, I'm not getting to the cushion as much as I like, or this is usually when your beginner practices, it's like the shame around not getting to the cushion. It's like, I'm not practicing as much as I would like to, or I get really bored, or I fall asleep on the cushion. If you're more senior in the community, it might be, well, I'm practicing with this teacher, or I'm going off to this retreat, or I'm doing these wonderful things, but really not talking about, like really the work itself, right? And so I'll clarify what I mean by that. And just taking a moment to slow down for my own self and make sure I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. Ultimately, what we do on the cushion is the most generous thing that we can give to ourselves. I know in my own pathway, I've suffered from a lot of disillusionment at different parts of my practice because I was chasing this awakened thing. So I was chasing teachers who can get me to awakening quicker and faster. I wanted the biggest, baddest teacher in the house who can cut through delusion, who can get me to where I need to get to. That took me into radical spaces. It took me into a lot of expensive places, paying for retreats that I couldn't afford. But really, it's this chasing of nirvana to escape my reality. And what I learned over a course of, after thousands of dollars and in joining a cult or two, what I learned in my practice is that disrupting karma, personal karma, is probably one of the most essential things that we can do in our practice, disrupting deeply held beliefs and patterns. And just the way that we look at the world, even if we believe that we look at the world in a good way, just constantly disrupting that, inviting in the curiosity and the vigor of questioning is the most generous thing that we can do. And then also dealing with the fallout of that, the shakiness of pulling the rug from underneath oneself, living in that liminal space. Most of humanity lives in some type of liminal space or another. It's a universal human experience that transcends culture, language, class. I learned over time that that is the most beautiful thing I can do for myself, the most generous thing. And in alignment with the teachings, sharing that out with others is the most generous thing that we can do for others. Participating in disrupting conditions of suffering that others are suffering under, even though they may not feel like um, that is the answer. Sometimes people want a check. People want a check. Sometimes people would rather have a volunteer time, but developing that courage to step in places and to offer one's practice, not in proselytizing, but in pure action, showing up courageously as yourself as you are, and sharing what you know is probably the most generous thing that you can do from others, for others. Mm. You know, and again, just inviting in, how is this resonating with you? How is this steeping? How is this landing, landing on you in this moment? Because I know for me, it's landing in quite a powerful and profound way. In a moment of stillness, one of the images I got in my mind that came to me was the image of the Buddha in a row with his disciples descending on villages with the alms bowl. And he required nothing in return. There was no price for his quality of presence and for his teachings. Not a price charged. And what he asked in return, what the alms bowl indicated, was that there was a call to action for the community to provide sustenance for his survival. What would make a person is so confident in one's practice that he can descend upon a village, any village, and so confident in one's own practice that he can live and sustain himself basically on what is given, what is put into that alms bowl. I mean, that is incredible. And I think for me, in the beginning of my practice, it was probably the most scariest thing that I could ever, imagine for oneself. But it was something that I was attracted to. What is this thing that he was able to do when he would visit and sit with different families, sit with different people, and speak directly to one's suffering, to really just pinpoint what was the point of suffering, and offer an anecdote, a story, or sometimes clear presence to the point that the value that he delivered warranted people returning that back with an offering of food or other resources. This story is pointing to something, and I don't know if I'm a sufficient vessel to get to what it is actually pointing to, but there is something there that is priceless, that is available to all of us, and that we can practice to our capacity, to whatever capacity that we have in this moment. but it also requires, right, for us to do the work on the cushion of sitting with ourselves and seeing like what is actually there. And I'm thinking about a lot of folks that are like, okay, when I sit on the cushion, there's really no material, no material there to work with. I get bored. But there's always like material for us to work with when we're on that cushion. And I'm just thinking about the venerables in North Carolina. Panadipa has passed away, but Panawati will always talk to her students, and she said, you know, she will always say that when you know what you're practicing with, and when you actually have the structure to practice, you actually get excited about the practice. You get really, you know, you develop this excitement for the practice, and it's almost like escaping to be away with the lover almost, right? Like meeting oneself on the cushion. And that type of confidence comes from the practice of renunciating, renunciating from energy patterns, behaviors, thoughts and concepts that may not be doing one any good. And again, shaking that rug, right? So that one is constantly living not in a state of being imprisoned by one's perception, but in this liminal space that is comforting, that we grow into comfort. It doesn't always start out that way, right? It's an acquired taste. For me, coffee was an acquired taste. I hate to say it, alcohol was an acquired taste until now I'm leaving that behind. But meditation is like that. The practice of mindfulness is like that. Disrupting karma is like that. It's an acquired taste, sticking with it and growing with it. And I'm pointing to this as a device because this is what we need in our society right now. You know, we need presence, people who can courageously show up in places that people are just, you know, unafraid to go to. And I'm not talking about a back alley, you know, I'm not talking about some dangerous black alley or you know, a drug house. Maybe that is somebody's calling in this room, but that's not what I'm speaking about. For me, even coming, you know, to spaces that I'm the only one, you know, feels like that, you know, is my personal call to action, to shake things up, to share a little bit of my heart and the things that I'm working on or working through or working with. And so I'm pointing to something here, and then so I'm gonna take a little deeper. I'm gonna jump a little bit more and see if now if some of the dots will connect. I go all over. And the reason why this is essential that we become deeply familiar with our karmic patterns, even if we in this lifetime are not able to overcome the patterns that deeply imprison us, you know, because some things may not be able to be overcome, but even the struggle in that. The first principle of generosity is that we share of ourselves. We share of ourselves without condition. Of course, skillfully, right? And when we perceive that it's safe to do so, but we share of ourselves freely. And we share of ourselves freely to a point that it makes it safe for someone to be freely themselves. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, for someone to be freely themselves, you know, you think about your coming out process, or if you have even but a coming out process, what that has done to someone who may have been struggling in a closet, you know, and a coming out process could be coming out of anything, you know, of health, you know, of addiction, of, of many things, and how that testimony touches and ripples. So this is what I'm saying, sharing of oneself, that it disarms, and that it makes others feel comfortable with being themselves. When we're more of ourselves, then we can see not only what our personal karmic chains are, but now we get to see what our communal, karmic energy is, and we can begin to work as a community. I wonder what do we all have in common in this room? There's something that brings us all together, believe it or not. There's an interlinking chain here of cause and condition that brings us all to this room on this one particular day. The universe is that perfect. What is it? Well, we won't know that, right? We'll all leave here with that mystery, because the heart, the conditions for the heart to reveal itself hasn't fully materialized or I'll leave it there. And then I'll go to the second principle of generosity is that all of our practices, all the cumulative practice that exists in this room has a structure. One of the things I love about this community is how efficient it is. That's why I have to do better with my bio. I have to submit a better bio. It's a very efficiently run community. I feel comfort in that structure because I can focus on working on my karmic, on my own conditioning, right? As I'm sitting here practicing, I'm not worried about, I know the structure is taking care of me, right? I can sit here and practice what I need to practice to show up for you all and with you all. Each one of us in this room has a structure to our practice, whether you know it or not, whether you want to admit it or not. Every practice, every individual person has a structure, and what is it? What is that structure? It may not be what our teachers have taught us. We may throw in a little of this and a little of that and a little floral arrangement and a little walk in the park, at 7:30 and maybe a social hour, but I'm doing this social hour religiously and I'm checking in on the folks who need to be checked in. These are all practices. As long as we're working on our hearts, disrupting harmful conditions, meeting heart to heart, it's all part of the work. So one of the things I've learned in my practice is not to throw anything. Everything is on the table. Nothing is off. In any place, any connection can be a sacred one. So speaking to this second principle of generosity, demystifying for others, especially those who need that structure, demystifying what it is, that holds us in our practice, whether our practice is, again, the daily walk or the on the cushion, but sharing our practice with others, right? And doing it without shame, having some courage to share what it is and why it is that we practice. And then thirdly, the third has to do with how we're maintaining the ecosystem, the ecosystem in which our structures exist in. And a big part of this is like maintaining, I think it's beautiful, that teachers have a set Dharma and that teachers are taken care of. So in that way, community, things have been taken care of. And in some other communities, it's a little bit more, negotiating and things like that. But the Dharma points to, how we care for our teachers and how we resource our teachers. And I would like to expand that definition, right? It's like how do we take care of each other on the pathway? Because ultimately, we're all teachers. And I heard a chuckle. So you might be a teacher. Just taking a moment to ground. Maybe give time for something to steep. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. And it's okay, right? We're on this journey together. Take what you need, leave what doesn't resonate. How we support our teachers, and there's a point that I wanted to make. The Buddha, generosity was the first, one of the most foundational teachings of this practice. And to my knowledge, the wisdom that the Buddha shared, he shared that without generosity and a generous heart, essentially the Dharma dies. And that's just the bottom line, that this practice dies with the last generation that holds it. And also too, like, the Dharma is universal. It also exists beyond Dharma temples, right? We know of people who are actually out there doing the work, right? Like really like out there doing the work. They might not even know that they're Buddhist, might not even agree with the label of being a Buddhist, right? And so in my concept of teacher, I anonymously support those who are doing the work and passing the Dharma along. Now I just leave that, I leave that for food for thought. And in a society right now where we're retracting a little bit from the generosity that especially made this place a special place. I'm talking about the Bay Area, a safe haven for so many folks who come here long distance to be a part of community, to find one's identity. And now as these places are becoming unsafe, as the United States is becoming unsafe, these are things to really think about. People who are actually doing this Dharma work, creating the ecosystems for their sustenance and survival, and getting together with folks to generate safe havens so that this work, this wisdom prevails in its universal form, and then also in its Buddhist form. And I am talking about Dharma teachers, but I'm also connecting it to a larger, beyond these walls, right? And beyond theory. And so, I'll kind of like bring my talk, and I'm gonna look at, so I'll begin with going into the final segment of this talk with sharing a personal story. So I think Jeff knows, I just returned back from Guatemala. It's interesting, I planned for this trip, I don't know, like maybe 3 days. It's like I had this 45th birthday that was coming up, and I had just gotten home from Mexico, and I went on this work retreat. and there was a death that had happened on the staff that touched my heart so profoundly. It wasn't that I knew this person incredibly well. It was just so profound how we kind of like moved past the death like really quickly. It was like a memo went out, person is in great condition, person died. Okay, we'll have a grief circle. Here's your benefits. Here's who you contact for grief counseling. Okay, and let's talk about budget. And it's like, whoa, this is society. This is where we live, and really, there's no judgment because business has to move on. But as I'm approaching my 45th birthday, I'm dealing with my own midlife sudden onset of midlife crisis. I just had this idea to go visit a volcano. I just need to be with volcanoes. and so, for some reason, Hawaii didn't call to me. I needed something a little bit more adventuresome, so I opted for Guatemala. So here you have it. I'm in Antigua, Guatemala, within 3 days, disoriented and looking at volcanoes, trying to find one that I could scale. And the reason why I wanted to visit a volcano was because the reason why I wanted to scale a volcano was because I wanted to let go of like a lot of grief that I was having in my heart. And not that this scaling would heal me of the grief. I just wanted to, in some significant way, honor grief that I was having in my heart and make a gesture that disrupted, my normal pattern, to disrupt it in a way that sent a message to my being that I love you, and I take what is happening, I take it seriously. And so, here you have it. I'm in this country, and I'm now scaling a mountain with this deep wish. And so then I come back home as if nothing, had happened. I go into work, and so people were like, "Well, how did you spend your birthday? And did you have a great time?" And I said, "Oh, I went to Guatemala for 3 days, and then I went up a volcano, and I let out a lot of grief. I was holding so much grief. My heart was hurting, so much from the death of our beloved colleague, and I'm just sharing, right? Just sharing, and this is my lived experience. I'm living this, so I'm thinking nothing of it, and I'm sharing this with a group of colleagues, and they just look at me like just so stunned that I would, first of all, that I would do something like that to honor my own grief, but second, that I would make such a kind, act toward myself. And at the time, I didn't see it as a kind act. It's just a survivor. I don't know. It's just something that I felt like needed to be done. I'm saying this to say that many folks at work came to me and asked me about grief, because what I had not realized was that people were still paralyzed in what had happened a week ago. And that freed up an incredible amount of space that I can actually be present and hold a grief healing circle for the rest of the staff who felt like left behind, right? And so I'm just saying, like, little things like that, the generosity that we give to ourselves impacts the generosity that we can give to others. And for me, sitting and hearing people's story as they process and grieve was really a small token of what I could do to create safety and structure for my colleagues. But for them, it may have meant the difference of how they were able to show up for their own families, their spouses, their children, their community. Because again, I work in a justice system where we witness this trauma like every day. And so I'm saying this to say to you, just sending that encouragement to continue nurturing within you your own practice, and really make that stretch to do generous things for yourself, to address and disrupt what you see and what you perceive as suffering. And then when there's enough spaciousness, offering that to others, and then also supporting others that you see doing that work, creating and maintaining that ecosystem. The most generous thing we can do, especially in this time. And so, I'll just, slow it down and wrap up here, and then open it up for community dialogue, not just questions, but also thoughts, personal experience, but really inside this view of cultivating a generous heart. Yeah, so it's okay to, we can open this up.
Anybody online, you can unmute, or in the room, speak up. Captain.
Thank you for a fantastic talk, really. A very generous talk, one could say. I really love the idea of holding all other people as teachers, and kind of in the way that I guess we elevate teachers, do that with everybody. I think is a fantastic way to move in the world, let's say. You mentioned providing safe haven. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that could be said about that. I'm not sure what you had in mind with the idea of us offering safe haven.
Yeah, that's it's interesting, because as I was saying safe haven, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, don't, because safe haven is such a loaded, I feel like in these communities especially, it's such a loaded term. And we want to do so much, right, to create safety. And so when we think of safety feels accessible, but haven feels big, right? It feels ginormous. I'm thinking about a homeless shelter or a domestic abuse center, or just refuge, people who are seeking refuge from their own country, asylum, thinking about things like that. And really what I meant, I approached the Dharma and this practice from a really practical sense, like what can we do right now in this room, right, to move a mountain? Because I believe that we can move a mountain just with the minds who are in this room. We do have enough skill set, in this room to do that. I wholeheartedly believe that. And so what I mean by safe haven is we can create safety for karmic disruption just by pure presence. I don't know if anyone in here has ever received a download from a teacher, maybe through eye contact. See, I don't want to get into like these topics, because it's like, okay, dude, we were with you, and then you started floating and going somewhere. But there are skilled teachers in this world who can disrupt karma and create a safe of safety, so that someone can unveil themselves to reveal their suffering, to have that disrupted. And so what I mean by safe havening is building that skill for oneself to meet oneself transparently, fully, bare, so that we can grow our capacity to witness someone in their suffering. Because we can only witness what we're allowed to see from, that we can see within ourselves. I remember when I went to graduate school, I'll just share this brief story. I went to graduate school and um, my field of study was intercultural relations. And before I got into the program, I had to take a battery, a series of tests. And I had studied abroad, I had did some traveling, so I thought, that I was culturally effective, right? And so when I got the debrief from my advisor, he said on this list, you rank really low, in terms of your cultural competence. You're not Really, I don't even know how you got into the program. Because you're not competently effective. And I said, well, what did I do wrong? Because I'm a good person. I've never disrespected someone when I've gone to their, home, or when I'm in their country. I'm trying to be respectful. And he said, you haven't really accepted the difference in you. You haven't dealt with your own, with the things that make you unique and different. And until you embrace that within yourself, you'll never have a authentic appreciation for difference in others. And that was my coming out moment, right? That's what started me on this unlayering. Okay, what different biases and cultural conditioning am I carrying? What socioeconomic conditioning do I have, and how does that interface? This is when I began uplifting my unique talents and abilities. And the reason why I did it was so that I can see others clearly, really is what it boiled down to. Because even at that time, I didn't even have the own self-love to do it for myself, but it was in service of others. So I just went all around the clear earth to say, safe haven is almost like paradoxical. It's like the safety that you create within to be able to create that haven without. And how small or big totally depends on it depends. But I wouldn't get hinged on the haven part or the safe haven. I don't know if that makes sense.
Jeff online, go ahead.
Thank you for a wonderful talk. I want to really echo what Cass was saying, and thank you for being who you are. I really appreciate your commitment to awakening. And I do a lot of retreats myself, but I don't decide in 3 days I'm going to go to Guatemala and scale the volcano to have a purge of my own grief. But I do other things to embody my commitment. But it's wonderful how we are all teachers in a way, and having presence of mind to be really self-aware and to be comfortable in our own skin so we can show up and be present. We become vehicles, and we create an environment in which somebody else can be safe enough to be free. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful description of it. Yeah.
And Jeff, last time I just gave appreciation to you. Last time I was here, and I'll continue to do that. Thank you for seeing me throughout the time that we've known each other. I think just your quality of presence gives me safety to unveil a little bit of myself, and then also the belief that I could come here and be a part of this community to offer Dharma. Um, it also says a lot, and so I am deeply grateful and appreciative of this invitation and just the quality of presence that you have gifted me throughout the years. And the limited, we haven't spent a lot of time together, but every time we have, the times that we have spent have been meaningful to me.
Yeah, thank you very much for the talk. The theme of generosity really spoke to me and provided a framework that helps me sort of understand things that I've been going through during the pandemic, and also a way to sort of get beyond them. So I appreciate that. It's a lot to think about. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I'd love to hear you say a few more words about the approach to practice, the approach to sitting on the cushion. Just to bring it down to that, you said some things that were very evocative about approaching sitting on the cushion as an exciting encounter with yourself. So if you could say a little bit more about that, curiosity and passion.
Yeah.
It could be helpful to me at least.
Yeah, and I thought about that. I also, at that mark too, like it was another thing in the back of my mind. I was like, oh, well, this is a whole other thing that, maybe I should, I just wanted to share. I had some trepidation there as I was sharing that. And the reason why is because to me, it falls a lot in line with the renunciation path and with faith. But what comes out on the other side when one doesn't have an accurate view of the practice, renunciation seems like another pathway to suffering. It's like, well, what? Like now you're asking me to give up, give up something. But when you come out on the other side of that, and you get this courage, the courage to show up for the world, and your faith deepens, then you understand that renunciation is not there to take anything. It actually gives you the courage to see what's there, and so you want to see what else is there. What more can I work with? And for me, in my own personal experience, I've been able to unattach myself from a lot of unhealthy circumstance because I finally developed the courage to sit on that cushion and see what was there. That I could eat the fruits of the work that I did, right? And it made me want, because I'm tasting fruit. Now I know that this alchemy, like this practice produces something, and it's wonderful and beautiful. But for me, I'll tell you, what really gets me is when it disrupts my pattern with other people and others benefit. When people say, I saw you struggling in this period of your life, and it's beautiful to be with you in this period. Or when someone struggles, or when someone is struggling with something, then they reference something that I've gone through in my own practice, which is giving them fruit for their own, for their own enjoyment or inspiration for their own practice. That gives me more courage to show up, more excitement to show up for that cushion. To show up for the cushion. I'm mincing my words, but there's something there on that cushion. If the cushion is I get it. I get into, when we're beginning, when we have plateaued because we feel like we have run out of things or that the practice has become boring. There are structural things that we can do to return back to a right view so that the cushion becomes more exciting, because we have endless source material. Every one of us in this room, endless amount of suffering, endless amount of delusion. You literally can, there's tons of things that you can practice with. And the joy is renunciating, working with energy, and getting to a place of equanimity with some of the things that you're holding, but really offering that gift to others, not as a cramming down someone's throat, but just the way that you show up. And people notice. that's the thing. Like people notice, they notice when you have gone through that work, and it's really our job to demystify that practice, you know, so that others can do that for themselves, and they're not over relying, you know, over relying on the work that you're able to do. I hope that I went down a path that was helpful, but I feel like that's another Dharma talk within itself.
Tom, online question.
Hey, Kevin, I know we're short on time. I'll make this pretty quick. I just want to say how much I appreciate your wisdom and how personal you make your talks. Like you're just so transparent and real that it makes the Dharma more real for me than just, you know, a lecture or something like that. I especially admire how you take care of yourself, um, the generosity you offer yourself, and you model that even when you speak. So I see you when you pause to collect your thoughts, to recenter yourself. And it's really quite moving, really. But it's such a great example of exactly what you're talking about. So you're not just telling us, you're showing us. And yeah, great admiration for everything that you've shared. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the very next time you come back.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, you know, being seen. Thank you. How am I on time? I'm over. Oh.
We need to stop, yeah. But I also would really like to say thank you for the reminder to think about why we're on the cushion and how it works out. And several weeks ago there was a talk by Larry Robinson. Because of that talk, I ended up being in a place last night and ran into a spiritual friend who told me that her wife had been diagnosed with brain cancer. And it was in a social, loud, wild setting, but like, it's just wild how the Dharma can move around in our lives and we don't even know. But sometimes I get in the habit of just sitting and not remembering why I'm sitting. So thanks for